10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 299. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 299 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Hope you're all doing well out there, and thank you so much for joining us yet again. Today we are going to be diving into part 4 of our series on tritone substitutions, and we're going to be talking about resolution points, probably the most important part of using the tritone substitution. But before we jump into the show, as usual, just wanted to let you know this is a listener-supported podcast, which means we do not do any advertisements on the show, and instead we rely on listeners just like you to support the show month in and month out and keep these episodes coming at you. The way to support the show is through the Patreon platform, and you can find all the information on joining the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson family by going to 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners, and there you can see all of the benefits you do get for becoming a member and how to support the show. Wanted to give a quick shout out to some new patrons this week. Thank you to our new $5 patron, Manuel. Thank you to our new $3 patrons, Alejandra, Vish, and Carol. And thank you to Terry for editing their pledge from $3 up to $5 for those extra benefits. So again, if you would like to join the over 350 people pledging their support to this show, head over to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners and get yourself signed up today. All right, so we have talked a lot about different options for using a tritone substitution in this series. And mainly we've been just talking about how we can actually change the progression as an improviser to get the sound of the tritone substitution into your playing. Today we're going to talk about how to actually physically resolve that tritone substitution to the one chord. And that is really the most important part, because what are we doing when we're introducing tritone substitution? We're introducing tension, and that tension needs to be resolved or it's not going to be an effective tool in our improvisation. So we need to talk about how we want to resolve the different avenues for resolution when we go into the one chord. And we want to sort of create a hierarchy of what resolution points are going to be better than others. What are the most interesting ones, all the way down to the least interesting resolution points. So we are going to be using the two structures that we've been using all the way along in this entire series, which is a triad and a 1-2-3-5 pattern. And we're going to talk about how each note interacts with the one chord when we finally decide to resolve. So what you should have is a clear and concise system for whatever note you end up on when you're going into the one chord. You should have a strategy for resolving that to a consonant note over the one chord. So we're going to be using the example of a C7 as the 5 chord moving into an F major 7 as the 1 chord. So we're going to identify a note over the 5 chord, and then we're going to identify a note we want to move to over the 1 chord. So let's get into the basics here. So over a C7 chord as the 5, we're going to be using, to start out here, an F sharp major triad, which is the tritone substitution of that C7 chord. So that's where all of our tension is going to come from. And an F sharp major triad consists of an F sharp, an A sharp, a C sharp, and then obviously an F sharp again. All right, so let's look at each one of those notes. So I'm going to start from the most desirable resolution into the least desirable. So we have a tie for the most desirable resolution points. Let's start by using that fifth of the tritone substitution, which is a C sharp over a C7 chord, the flat 9. Now, when we go to F major 7 from the C7 chord, what we want to do is we want to resolve down by a half step into the 5th of the 1 chord. So we'll get this, and then we will resolve to this. Tension and release. That is probably our most desirable and probably the most commonly used resolution point coming from a tritone substitution. So that would be a C sharp into a C natural, flat 9 over the 5 chord into 5 over the 1 chord. All right, let's move on to the second one, that is a tie. Now what we want to look at is the third of that tritone substitution triad, which is going to be a B flat over a C7 chord. And this is really inside, actually, over the 5 chord. It's just the flat 7 over that C7 chord. But nevertheless, it's part of that triad that we're using for the tritone substitution. And same thing here, we're going to come into an A natural over the F major chord. Okay, so again, we have tension. And that flat 7 is tense, even though it fits with the chord. That's one of the beauties of the 5 chord, is that the 7th is kind of a tense note. And then we're going to get our release with that A natural, the 3rd over the 1 chord. Okay, so now we have two options. We have the flat 9 resolving to the 5. And we also have the flat 7 resolving to the 3rd. So those are our two most desirable when we're using a tritone substitution triad, okay? Now, the least desirable but still acceptable is to use the root of the tritone substitution, which would be F sharp over C7, and then going down a half step into the 1 of the 1 chord. So resolving down a half step to F. And you could hear it's the least desirable because it's the least interesting. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use it. I've used this before. But it's a little bit less interesting than this sound. You can kind of hear that it's less interesting than flat 9 into 5 or flat 7 into 3, but still a viable option. Okay, so then if we move into the second device that we've been using in this series, which is 1, 2, 3, 5, we introduce one other note into the equation here that's not in that triad, and that is going to be G sharp over C7, which is the second of the tritone substitution, so the second of F sharp. Now, this note, we have options. We can either resolve up to A, which sounds great and is actually our only resolution point that moves up instead of dropping down. Or we have another option, which is a little bit more advanced. We can actually resolve to the 9th over the 1 chord, which is kind of a cool sound. It's a little bit less clear, but it is a sound that I absolutely love. So it's that G sharp down to G over the F major 7 chord, which I think sounds really, really nice. And it is one that I really enjoy using. But a word of caution, I didn't really start using that resolution point until after I had mastered the others, after I had a lot of experience resolving to the 5th and the 3rd and the root. Then I decided to get the skill of resolving to the 9 sort of into my playing. Okay, so as you're going through the previous 3 episodes and you're starting to work on those progressions that I've presented to you, I want you to make sure that the highest item on your list of priorities when you're working on this is using one of those resolutions. I want you to make sure that you are always resolving either up or down by a half step. And we know that it's mostly going to be down, right? This is really going to teach you a lot about voice leading and about how to properly use that tension and release, which is what the tritone substitution at the end of the day is all about. We need that clean tension and release. The other thing I want you to remember is that you have to release on the downbeat for now. Once you get a lot more advanced and you start studying other ways to use these tritone substitutions, there is such thing as like delaying the resolution, but not right now. Resolve on the downbeat of the one chord at all times for right now. So you you get that nice, clean tension and release right when those chords happen. Okay. So I know this is kind of a lot and it's going to give you a lot to think about. Now you've got all those progressions that I presented to you. And now you have all of these release points that you have to think about. But what you'll notice is on the previous episodes, everything that I played or wrote out contains these exact resolution points. And you will see them in practice, particularly in the lick of the month and the tune of the month from last month. You'll see that I'm actually using these in practice, and it is what is creating that desirable sound in all of those materials that I've presented to you. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions on this. I know we covered a lot of information in a very short period of time. Definitely leave me a question in either the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson community Facebook group, or you can always email me at 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com. Be happy to answer those questions and get you on the right path. But resolutions do not work on tritone substitution without being very careful about your resolution points. That is what is going to make this as effective as possible in your playing. All right, let me know. I hope you are all staying safe and healthy out there. And we're going to do something a little bit different this month. We're going to actually do 2 Tune of the Month episodes, one over the blues and one over rhythm changes, so that we can kind of bring this series to a close using a bunch of different chord progressions that we've talked about and these resolutions. So definitely stay tuned for that. Hope you're all doing well, and we will talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.